All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome back to the Dharma Doors. I'm MC Owens, and this is the San Francisco Dharma Collective. And tonight we're going to read another sutta. We are still making our way through the Majjhima Nikāya. We are moving on to sutta number 83 this evening. This is going to be the Maghadeva Sutta, the teaching concerning King Maghadeva. So, just a quick reminder, this giant collection is actually just one of many collections of old original Pali suttas or suttas that were in the Pali language. In this volume, the sutras are gathered together in groups of 10. And we are talking about a group of 10 sutras with the group is called the Rajavagga, the collection to the kings. And this is going to be our third sutra to the kings. And again, this one is concerning King Maghadeva. Um, this is a very interesting sutta tonight. Very interesting teaching. Um, It has a lot of similarities to the first sutta in the Rajavagga section. So if you came to Dharma Doors, I guess a few weeks ago, we did the Gatikara, I think his name was. That's the sutta number 80 or 81, I think it is. Yeah, 81. And that's the first one to the kings. Again, this one has a lot of similarities with that first one. Um, Yeah, this is the reason why I say this is an interesting sutta tonight is because if you're not like paying attention, you would think that the sutra is about one thing, but it's actually kind of about another thing in a way. It's a very interesting sutta. So let's go ahead and dive in. Um, yeah, so again, this is sutta number 83 in the Majjhima Nikāya. And it goes a little something like this. Thus have I heard. On one occasion, the Blessed One was living at Mithila in the Maghadeva mango grove. Maghadeva is the name of the sutra, and he's in the mango grove called Maghadeva. Then, in a certain place, the Blessed One smiled, and it occurred to the Venerable Ananda, what is the reason? What is the cause for the Blessed One's smile? Tathagatas do not smile for no reason. So Ananda arranged his upper robe on his shoulder and extending his hands in reverential salutation towards the Blessed One, he asked him, Venerable Sir, what is the reason, what is the cause for the Blessed One's smile? Tathagatas do not smile for no reason. So this is where we should be reminded of the first sutta in here, which was also one of these situations where the Buddha and Ananda, it seems to always be Ananda, the Buddha and Ananda were also walking together in the other sutta, and the Buddha smiled. And Ananda said the same thing, which is that, ooh, there's got to be a reason, because Buddhas don't just go around smiling for no reason. And then in that sutta, the Buddha recounted a past life. And these past lives or past births are called Jatika tales. So jati, you may know this word jati, it means birth. So a Jatika is a birth tale or a birth story. And it's a whole kind of like little genre of Buddhist literature where it's about the Buddha recalling past lives. Well, in the other sutta and in this sutta, what we're basically getting is a Jataka tale in the form of a sutra. And actually what's going to happen with this particular sutta tonight, we're getting two Jataka tales combined into one story. So that's kind of interesting. So I just wanted to draw your attention. This is what might be called an itivritika. An itivritika is this sort of like um, recalling of a past life. The Jataka is the story, but the actual act of the Buddha recalling a past life is this sort of itivritika. So we know that we're getting ready for kind of a bedtime story in that way. So this is what the Buddha told Ananda. He said, once upon a time, Ananda, in this exact same place of Matila, there was a king named Maghadeva. He was a righteous king who ruled by the Dharma, a great king who was established in the Dharma. He conducted himself by the Dharma among Brahmins and householders, among town dwellers and country folk, and he observed the Upasatta days on the 14th or 15th and the 8th of the fortnight. And actually, even before we go further, we need to have a quick talk about this because we don't always get such an opportunity as this. So if you read Buddhist sutras, if you read Buddhist literature, you may have come across the expression a wheel-turning sage king, also known as a chakravartin. So a chakravartin is this idea of a wheel-turning king, a sagely king. And the Buddha talks a lot about chakravartins. Now, in general, what they're talking about is sort of a righteous ruler or a righteous leader, not a dictator, not a despot, but a righteous leader. But there's something more to that. And in order to kind of actually understand the whole arc of the sutta tonight, this Maghadeva, and I'm going to tell you this now. Maghadeva is a past life of the Buddha. Surprise! We were going to find this out at the end, but I kind of want you to know about it now that this King Maghadeva is an ancient past life of the Buddha when he was a wheel-turning sage king. And that's what it means by that he ruled by the Dharma, he was established in the Dharma, and he conducted himself by means of the Dharma. But what I would like you to know is that there are stories of these wheel-turning sage kings, and I don't actually know if this is like literal or kind of figurative, but they actually receive often from the gods and a wheel like an actual kind of like a ship's steering wheel, like one of those kind of wheels. And that wheel is a symbol of their righteous ruling. And they rule basically according to Dharma. But what that means is that basically there is this sort of like, it's basically the 10 commandments of Buddhism. The 10 commandments of Buddhism in terms of not killing, not stealing, not kind of abusing sexual energy, not lying, not gossiping, not using harsh speech, not using malicious speech, avoiding covetousness, avoiding ill will, and avoiding stupidity or delusion. Those are these 10 like rules or these 10 precepts. And a ruler who kind of rules using those Buddhist 10 commandments is considered a chakravartin. And so Makadeva was a righteous ruler, a good ruler in that way. And we're going to want to we're going to keep our eye on that, that idea of Makadeva being a righteous ruler. But now we're going to get the kind of the story part of this. So now, at the end of many years, many hundreds of years, many thousands of years, King Makadeva addressed his barber, saying this: "Good barber, when you see any gray hairs growing on my head, tell me." "Yes, sir," the barber replied. And then after many years, many hundreds of years, many thousands of years, the barber saw gray hairs growing on King Makadeva's head. When he saw them, he said to the king, "The divine messengers have appeared, sire. Gray hairs are to be seen growing on your majesty's head." "Then, good barber, pull out those gray hairs carefully with tweezers and put them in the palm of my hand." "Yes, sire," the barber replied, and he plucked out those gray hairs carefully with tweezers and put them in the king's palm. Then King Makadeva gave the prize of an entire village to his barber. And then he called his son, the prince, his eldest son, and said to him, "Dear prince, the divine messengers have appeared. Gray hairs are seen growing on my head. I have enjoyed human sensual pleasures. Now it's time to seek divine sensual pleasures. Come, dear prince, take over the kingship. I shall shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from the home life into homelessness. And now, dear prince, when you too see gray hairs growing on your head, then, after giving the boon of a village to your barber, and after carefully instructing your eldest son, the prince, in the kingship, you too should shave off your head and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from home life into homelessness. Continue this good practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man. Dear prince, when there are two men living, he under whom there occurs a breach of this good practice, he's the last man among them. Therefore, dear prince, I say to you, continue this good practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man." And then after giving the boon, after giving the gift of a village to his barber, and after carefully instructing the prince, his eldest son, in kingship, in the Makadeva mango grove, the king shaved off his hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and went forth from the home life into homelessness. All right, so there we have this scenario. Now, we need to pay very close attention to this sutra because it's a very subtle thing going on here. So, oh, and by the way, if you didn't catch it, this story is taking place in the distant, distant, distant past. And you may not know this about kind of Buddhist cosmology, but what it is that as time goes on, as like history goes on, in the in the Buddhist tradition, they have a very long sense of history that goes way back. And in the world of Buddhism, the lifespan of human beings fluctuates. Sometimes the lifespan of human beings is hundreds of thousands of years, like in this sutra. But then over time, the lifespan of human beings decreases and decreases. And what they say is the lifespan, it can get like even less than 100 years. But then there'll be an upswing and the lifespan of human beings will get greater and greater and greater, all until it's upwards of hundreds of thousands again, only to degrade back down to less than 100 and then back up. So when we hear about the hundreds of thousands of years passing, they're kind of letting us know, oh yeah, this is taking place back when times were good. And we're going to kind of want to remember that these are the good days. And so the king has this funny thing about the gray hairs and the sign of aging, the sign of, uh-oh, the clock is ticking. And so he makes this decision to renounce the throne, pass it on to his children or to his child, and then he's going to renounce. And the one thing that I kind of want you to know going into this is that there is this sort of Indian cultural tradition of what are called like the 4 stages of life. And this sutra is very aware of that. And it's actually kind of in dialogue with that. But traditionally in Indian culture, you would spend the first 20, 25 years of your life as a student. It's actually called a brahmacharyan, but it means like a student, a learner. And then you would become a gahapati or a householder in that way. And then you would spend basically from age 25 to 50 as a householder. Then from age 50 to 75, you would be a sort of quasi-renunciant, meaning you passed off all your responsibility to your children or to your spouse. And now you're just in a stage of sort of like kind of studying spirituality in that way. But the point is that from 75 to 100, so the 4th stage of life, that's when you would renounce completely and like go off into the woods and really meditate and really perform spiritual practices. So this is kind of mirroring that, where the king has had signs of aging and has now passed off everything to his son, and now he's going to go do practice in that way. Now we're going to get the practice portion of the sutra. So after going off into homelessness, we hear this. The king, Maghadeva, abided pervading one direction, providing one quarter, with a mind imbued with metta, loving kindness. Likewise, he did to the second direction, the second quarter, the third quarter, and the fourth quarter. And so above and so below, around and everywhere. And this metta, this loving kindness, it was extended to all as if to oneself. The king abided pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. All right. Now, of course, there's going to be three more steps to this, but really quickly, in case anybody out there hasn't heard this before, I want to kind of remind us all. So the king, having renounced and went into homelessness, he's in the mango grove and he's doing what we call the Brahma Vihara practices. It's actually what they're even called in this sutra. So these are the abodes of Brahma, and these are the meditation on first metta. Now, the text translates metta in the classic way of loving kindness, but I always like to kind of remind everybody that the word metta, that's the root of the word for friendliness, like being friendly, being kind of kind. There's no problem with the translation of loving kindness. Loving kindness is great, but it's just actually nice to know that it's about being friendly. And what's happening here, if you've never done a metta meditation, what you are doing is that you are filling your heart and mind with loving kindness, with this metta, with a feeling of friendliness. And then you are basically extending that feeling of friendliness infinitely in, say, the northern direction. And then eastern, western, southern, above, below, all around, everywhere. So it's this sort of like, it's hard to explain exactly what this is, but it is this evoking or generating this sense of friendliness and extending it outward in all directions and everywhere. Now, the idea is that traditionally, of course, this sort of friendliness, the idea here, and this is the important part of the practice, we tend to be maybe friendly towards some people and not so friendly maybe towards other people. This is the practice of being equally friendly towards all beings, like really, really trying to develop a unconditional friendliness in that way. Next up, and this is where the sutra, by the way, I'm going to mention this a few times tonight. It's in situations like this where it's a little unfortunate that this version of the sutra kind of abridges the text and it doesn't actually go through the entire process. And because of time, I'm not going to be able to go through the entire process either. But the idea is that after extending metta in all directions, above, below, and to everybody all around, the king next abided pervading one quarter or one direction with a mind imbued with karunya, compassion. And compassion is a different emotion in a way than friendliness. Friendliness, by the way, traditionally, friendliness has to do sort of with it basically has to do with greed or not, a kind of withholding or being friendly and generous. So what I'm getting at is that traditionally metta, or the first of these, is dealing with desire and wanting and sort of that idea of usually we just like gimme, 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 gimme. But the practice of metta is about the other and being friendly to the other. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is because then karunya, compassion, that's usually about anger and violence and being like mean. And then compassion is not doing that. Compassion is being gentle. So these have different tones to them, friendliness versus compassion. And then again, karunya or compassion is the second of these mind states. I really want to emphasize the language of, the language of abiding, pervading the all-encompassing world with a mind imbued with compassion, right? So we're going for like saturating, saturating ourselves, saturating the world with these emotions, right? And then, of course, likewise, the king abides with a mind of mudita, empathic joy. It is translated often as empathic joy. So the king develops a mind of joy for others, like being excited for others, joyful for others, and pervades one direction, two directions, three directions, four directions, above, below, and all around with this emotion of altruistic or empathic joy. And then, fourth, the king abides with a mind of upekkha or upeksha in Sanskrit. What is normally translated and what is translated in this as a mind of equanimity. And once again, that equanimity is cultivated and then extended out in one direction, two directions, three directions, four directions, above, below, and everywhere. So that's our first description of the four Brahma Viharas, right? These four abodes of Brahma. And we're going to find out why they're called that in a moment. But any questions about that practice? Yeah, no.
Yeah, my question is, you drew a connection between metta and greed, and you
Mm-hmm.
drew a connection between karuna and hatred or anger. What about mudita? Does it connect to delusion? Or
I think in many ways, the third and the fourth both kind of do in a way. Yeah, there's not a direct correlation.
yeah,
I've come across so many other sutras where metta is a particular practice that the Buddha prescribes for people who have too much desire.
yeah, yeah,
Whereas the compassion practice the Buddha gives for people who have too much anger.
yeah,
And I've only seen those parallels, so I can't answer
yeah.
your question exactly, no, but
Yeah, it's something that just what occurred to me is it's to not be happy for other people's happiness is like talk about delusional. Like that's why wouldn't you be happy for other people's happiness?
it it's a really good point, Noam. Yeah, I often think about that. If I ever am kind of resentful towards other people's whatever, I wonder like what's up with that? Like why what do I think the benefit is in doing that? Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
It was very clear. I
Oh,
appreciate it.
oh, excellent. And by the way, Noam, or everybody, but also to Noam, I want to emphasize a couple of things. So the first thing that I want to emphasize regarding this practice, I've mentioned this a lot, and this sutra is a testament to it. This practice of the four Brahma Viharas is an old Indian practice. Even the Buddha says, "Yeah, I didn't make this up. People have been doing this forever." So I want to make it clear that this practice is not exclusively a Buddhist practice. It predates Buddhism. In fact, according to this sutra, it goes back to way before even the Buddha got enlightened, like lifetimes before the Buddha got enlightened. So that's the first thing, is that it's an old practice. And then the second thing that I want us to kind of notice we need to sort of notice, or I would like us to notice that there's a way of reading this, of course, where I guess what you would say is that there's a way of reading this where it's descriptive. And what I mean by that is it's we are hearing about King Makadeva in the mango grove doing this practice. But there's also a way in which, in the brief period of time in which I'm reading this, and we are imagining the king in the mango grove developing a mind of metta and then extending that in all directions, we are doing the practice. And therefore, it is not descriptive, it's prescriptive. It's a prescription. It's telling you, like, yeah, read this, think about this. And the reason why I'm emphasizing this aspect of the sutra, that the idea that actually just hearing this is the practice of metta, karuna, mudita, and upeksha. The reason why I'm saying this is because it's going to get repeated again and again and again, meaning I'm not going to do it, but if you were to read this sutra properly, you would go through the four Brahma Viharas many, many times. So we need to kind of keep that in mind, that reading or hearing these sutras is kind of a meditative experience in that way. All right. So in case you got lost, I'm on paragraph 6 of this edition, bottom of page 693. So the king, Makadeva, our primary person right now, has done the four Brahmavihara meditations. And then it says, for 84,000 years, King Makadeva played childish games. For 84,000 years, he acted as vice regent. For 84,000 years, he governed the kingdom. And for 84,000 years, he led the holy life in this Makadeva mango grove, after shaving off his hair and beard, putting on the yellow robe, and going forth from the home life into homelessness. By developing the four Brahma Viharas upon the dissolution of the body, after death, he passed on and was reborn in the Brahma world. So you might have noticed it. He spent 84,000 years playing with childish things, 84,000 years as like vice regent, 84,000 years as king, and then 84,000 years as a renunciant. So that kind of maps on to our four stages of life. You might have noticed that auspicious number 84,000 there, right? Well, I had weird suspicions about this sutra. There's a lot of recurrences of the number four going on in this one, with the four stages of life, the four Brahma Viharas, and there's going to be more fours. And what's interesting is I went looking for a little bit of information on this auspicious number 84,000. And you know what the first thing I came across was? That 84,000 is the highest expression of the number four. That was like the first explanation of the number 84,000 that I came across. And I couldn't help but find that very interesting. So, by the way, I don't have any other information regarding that auspicious number 84,000. It does pop up a lot in the world of Buddhism. It does seem to be a number that sort of, it kind of stands for everything. There's like always 84,000 different types of things. So, just want you to know that. So the king spends his 84,000 years in the different stations of life, We are to understand that he spends 84,000 years doing the Brahma Vihara meditation in the mango grove. And now we find out why it's the Brahma Vihara practice. Because if you do it after you die, you are no longer reborn in the realm of human beings. You're not even reborn in the realm of like mammals or hell dwellers, of course. You're reborn in the Brahma realm. And so doing the Brahma Vihara practice is what guarantees you entry into the Brahma realms upon passing away. So, any questions about that part of the story? Yeah, Noe.
Uh, the Brahma realms, the God realms.
Well, actually, I'm glad you asked, Noe. So, we always need to keep in mind that there's a very interesting division that takes place in the world of Buddhism. And it's the division between the realm of desire and what's called the realm of pure form, the Rupa Dhatu. We're down here in the Kama Dhatu. And there's a god that's going to make an appearance in the sutra soon. And that god is Shakra, Shakra Devanamindra. And Shakra is the the god of the realm of desire. Brahma is the god of the realm of form. And what that means is that in Buddhist cosmology, and this is kind of like general Indian cosmology too, by the way, what that means is that Brahma is the creator god that like works with earth, fire, water, and air and fabricates the world. Chakra is like the the god of human affairs, like the god of our desires and the realm of desire and all of that. Chakra is rather active in the world. Brahma is an aloof force. But the idea is that if you do Brahma Vihara practice, you transcend the realm of desire and you are reborn in the Brahma realms. And when you die, you are guaranteed kind of permanent rebirth in the Brahma realms. In other words, in the realm of pure form, not the realm of desire. So, yeah, Noe?
No,
No. Um,
but let's go.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, no, but
little bit
I,
of a question because the stages in Buddhism are the how many the hell realm, the hungry ghosts, the animals,
sure.
blah 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 blah, and then there's the God realm. Is this between the God? So
Ah,
this is an Indian. This is a Brahmin. Yes.
well, so the Brahmins, the reason why they're called Brahmins is because they're interested in having a relationship with Brahma. And when you say the realm of the gods, Noe, I do want to make it clear that there are gods of the realm of desire and there are gods of the realm of form. And they're sort of two different classes of gods in that sense. And by the way, if anybody out there is like, I don't know about all this gods business, please understand they are fully aware that this is all a mythological language. When they talk about the realm of desire, they're talking about your psychological drama. When they're talking about the realm of form, they're talking about the realm of atoms and particles. It's all very kind of understandable. Like they're not, yeah. So I want to make that clear, right? Really hear this as mythological. All right. So that's our kind of initial story about King Makadeva. But of course, we haven't even really gotten to the point yet, though. So now, and I'm on section 7. Now, at the end of many years, many hundreds of years, many thousands of years, King Makadeva's son addressed his barber, saying, "Hey, let me know whenever you see any gray hairs." And of course, the barber, after hundreds of thousands of years, the barber saw some gray hairs, told King Makadeva's son, who is now the king, tells him about the gray hairs. And the king then pulls his son and says, "Hey, we found the gray hairs. I'm going to renounce. You got to take over, but make sure you keep this practice going. Make sure you do this thing that when you see the gray hairs, you renounce, and then you pass it on to your children." And then King Makadeva's son renounces the home life, goes into the mango grove, and performs and develops the 4 Brahma Viharas. And then, by developing the 4 divine abodes, or the 4 Brahma Viharas, upon the dissolution of the body after death, King Makadeva's son passed on to the Brahma world. I want you to know that if we were reading this sutra in its entirety, we would have once again developed loving kindness, extended it out in all directions. We would have developed compassion, extended it out in all directions. So again, if you were to read this sutra in its entirety, you would be hypnotized through these repetitions. And then the descendants of King Makadeva's son, to the number of 84,000 of them, 84,000 kings in succession, each, after shaving off their hair and beard and putting on the yellow robe, went forth from the home life into homelessness, and in this Makadeva mango grove, they abided, pervading 1/4 with a mind imbued with loving kindness, 2, 3, 4, above and below, and so forth. They too abided, pervading 1/4 with a mind of compassion, and all around, empathic joy all around, and equanimity all around. For 84,000 years, all of those 84,000 kings played their childish games. For 84,000 years, they all acted as vice regents. For 84,000 years, they all governed the kingdom. And for 84,000 years, they all led the holy life in this Makadeva mango grove, after shaving off their hair and beard, putting on the yellow robe, and going forth from the home life into homelessness. And by developing the 4 divine abodes upon dissolution of the body after death, they all passed on, one after the next, to the Brahma world. Nimi was the last of those kings. He was a righteous king who ruled by the Dharma, a great king who was established in the Dharma. He conducted himself by the Dharma among Brahmins and householders, among town dwellers and country folk, and he observed the holy days, the Upasata days, on the 14th or 15th and on the 8th of the fortnight. So this is King Nimi, the last of them. Once, Ananda, when the gods of the realm of desire, so the gods of the 33 levels of heaven that exist around Mount Meru, so when the gods of the 33 levels of heaven had met together and were seated atop Mount Meru in the Hall of Good Dharma, it's called the Sudharma Hall. This is Chakra's palace on top of Mount Meru. So, when the gods of the 33 had met together and were settled in the Sudharma assembly, this discussion arose among them. It is a gain, sirs. It is a gain for the people of Videha. It is a great gain for the people of Videha that their king Nimi is a righteous king who rules by the Dharma, a great king who is established in the Dharma. He conducts himself by the Dharma among Brahmins and householders, among town dwellers and country folk, and he observes the Upasatta days on the 14th and 15th and the 8th of the fortnight. Then Shakra, Devanam Indra, Shakra, ruler of the Devas, ruler of the gods. He addressed all of the gods of the 33 levels of the realm of desire and said, "Good sirs, do you want to see King Nimi?" "Good sir," they all replied, "we want to see King Mini or King Nimi." Now, on that occasion, it being the Upasatta day of the full moon, the 15th day, King Nimi had washed his head and had ascended to the upper palace chamber, where he was seated for the Upasatta observance. Then, just as quickly as a strong man might extend his flexed arm or flex his extended arm, Shakra, ruler of the gods, vanished among the gods of the 33 and appeared in the presence of King Nimi. He said, "It is a gain for you, great king. It is a great gain for you, great king." When the gods of the 33 had met together and were seated in the Sudharma assembly, this discussion arose among them. "It is a gain, sirs. It is a great gain for the people of Videha that the king is a good king and observes the Upasatta days on the 8th of the on the 14th, 15th, and 8th of the fortnight. Great king, the gods want to see you. I shall send a chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds for you, great king. Great king, mount that divine chariot without misgiving." King Nimi consented in silence. Then, just as quickly as a strong man might flex his arm or flex his extended arm, Shakra, ruler of the gods, vanished in the presence of King Nimi and appeared among the gods of the 33. Then Shakra, ruler of the gods of the realm of desire, addressed his charioteer, Matali, saying, "Come, good Matali, prepare a chariot harnessed by 1,000 thoroughbreds, and go to King Nimi and say, 'Great king, this chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds has been sent to you by Shakra, ruler of the gods. Great king, mount this divine chariot without any misgivings.'" "Yes, your honor," the charioteer Matali replied, and having prepared a chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds, he went to King Nimi and said, "Great king, this chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds has been sent by Shakra, ruler of the gods. Great king, mount this divine chariot without any misgiving. But great king, since we're going to the realm beyond the living," I'm filling in a blank here, but since we're going all the way to the top of Mount Meru beyond the realm of the living, he says, "By which route shall I take you? By that on which doers of evil experience result, or by, should we go the way by which doers of evil experience the results of their evil actions? Or should we go by that way which doers of good experience, by doers of good experience the results of their good actions?" So you want to go to heaven and then to hell? Or do you want to go to hell and then heaven? And he says, "Drive me both ways." And so Matali brought King Nimi to the Sudharma assembly on the top of Mount Meru, having gone both through hell and through heaven. Shakra, ruler of the gods, saw King Nimi coming in the distance and said to him, "Come, great king, welcome, great king. The gods of the 33, great king, seated in the Sudharma assembly, they've expressed themselves thus. It is a gain, sirs, it is a great gain for the people of Videha that King Nimi is so great and observes the Upasatta days. Great king, the gods of the 33, they want to see you. Great king, enjoy divine might among the gods. But the king says this, enough, good sir. Let the charioteer drive me back to Matila. There I will conduct myself by the Dharma among Brahmins and householders, among town dwellers and country folk. There I will observe the Upasatta days on the 14th or 15th and the 8th of the fortnight. Then Shakra, ruler of the gods, told the charioteer Matali, come, good Matali, prepare the chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds and drive King Nimi back to Matila. Yes, your honor, the charioteer Matali replied, and having prepared the chariot harnessed to 1,000 thoroughbreds, he drove King Nimi back to Matila. And there, indeed, King Nimi conducted himself by the Dharma among Brahmins and householders, among town dwellers and country folk. And there he observed the Upasatta days on the 14th or 15th and on the 8th of the fortnight. And then, at the end of many years, many hundreds of years, many thousands of years, King Nimi addressed his barber saying, hey, let me know when you find some gray hairs on my head. And sure enough, after hundreds of years and thousands of years, the barber found gray hairs on King Nimi's head and told him about it. And so King Nimi pulled his son aside. Well, first of all, he gave the barber a whole village. And then he pulls his son aside and says, son, I'm going to renounce. You got to take over the throne. But remember, when you find a gray hair, you should renounce. And so then King Nimi renounces the throne, goes into homelessness, practices the 4 Brahma Viharas, and then by developing the 4 divine abodes upon the dissolution of the body after death, he passed on to the Brahma world. Now, King Nimi had a son named Kalara Janaka. He did not go forth from the home life into homelessness. He broke that good practice. He was the last man among them. Now, Ananda, it may be that you're thinking, certainly on that occasion, someone else was King Maghadeva, who instituted that good practice, but it should not be regarded as thus. I was King Maghadeva on that occasion. I instituted that good practice, and later generations continued that good practice instituted by me. But that kind of good practice, it doesn't lead to disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. It only leads to rebirth in the Brahma world. But there is this kind of good practice that has been instituted by me now, which leads to complete disenchantment, to total dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. And what's that good practice? It's the Noble Eightfold Path. That is, having right view, right intentions, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This is the good practice instituted by me now, which leads to the complete disenchantment, to dispassion, to cessation, to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to nirvana. Ananda, I say to you, continue this good practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man. Ananda, when there are two men living, he under whom there occurs a breach of this good practice, he's the last man among them. Therefore, Ananda, I say to you, continue this good practice instituted by me, and do not be the last man. This is what the Blessed One said. The Venerable Nanda was satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words. All right, so let's back up. So we have the full kind of story there, which is, oh, by the way, the sutta doesn't mention it, but the Buddha was both King Maghadeva and King Nimi in previous lives. He was not the kings in between them, though. And what it says, or at least the footnote, or one of the footnotes, is that Nimi can mean a hoop. And the idea is that with King Maghadeva and King Nimi, the story goes full circle, I think we would say in English. And so that idea of the story going full circle is sort of captured by the last king's name, King Nimi. So the Buddha was both of them. And then we get this kind of funny story about King Nimi being invited all the way up to the top of Mount Meru. I mentioned this a number of weeks ago, but there are Mahayana sutras that kind of riff off of this idea of going up to the top of Mount Meru and visiting chakra. Like this happens in other sutras, especially Mahayana sutras. And I just want all the Dharma heads out there, all the sutra readers, I want us to recognize a sutra like this is sort of the origin of that narrative of being like invited up to Chakra's palace. Now, I think what we are to understand is that King Nimi, or the way that I would read that is that, you know, King Nimi being in, the gods want to see King Nimi, and Chakra personally comes and invites him up to the you know, the palace at of the heaven of 33. I think we could read that as like King Nimi had a really good meditation. like crazy good. He went all the way up to the peak of the realm of desire. And that's where I'm really happy that Noe asked his question about which gods are these, because it allowed me to make that distinction between the realm of form, the Brahma realm, and the realm of desire, which is the realm of chakra. And that might make sense, that it might make more sense then why King Nimi is like, yeah, nice to see you guys, but I'm going to get back to practicing. And you would miss it if you don't recognize that King Nimi doesn't want to be in the realm of desire, even if it's at the apex of the realm of desire in that way. So that's my interpretation of that little story of King Nimi being invited all the way up to the top of Mount Meru and him not even wanting to be there. And then we get the kind of completion of the story, which is this idea that, what's his name? Kalarajanaka, the King Nimi's son, who doesn't keep up the tradition. Now, if you remember what I was saying before about the lifespan of human beings fluctuating, well, the narrative is because this king's son broke that tradition, At this point, the world is going to start falling apart, and the lifespan of human beings is going to start getting smaller and smaller and smaller until when the lifespan of human beings is about 80 years, Siddhartha will be born. So I just kind of want to put you in that kind of the narrative, the big narrative in that way, that the Buddha used to live as a king when his lifespan was hundreds of thousands of years. And then one of his delinquent sons broke the tradition and everything started to fall apart. But that's, of course, not exactly the story here. The story here is all, I mean, if you ask me, the story is in paragraph 21, where the Buddha says, yeah, I was King Maghadeva, and I came up with this brilliant idea that when I see gray hairs, I'll renounce and I'll pass everything on to my son, and they'll do that. He says, yeah, back then I was that guy, and I came up with that great plan. He says, but now, here, as the Buddha, I've instituted this other plan. And this other plan, or what I should say is that that practice of doing the Brahma Vihara practice, the loving kindness, the Buddha says that doesn't lead to disenchantment. It doesn't lead to dispassion. It doesn't lead to cessation. It doesn't lead to peace. It doesn't lead to direct knowledge, enlightenment, or nirvana. What it leads to is rebirth in the Brahma realm. So that's a very important thing to, like, if we want to understand this sutra, it's complicated because it's good to do loving kindness meditation. It's good to do karunya or compassion meditation. It's good to do the 4 Brahma Viharas. It's good to follow the 10 virtuous actions of avoiding killing, stealing, lying, and so forth. It's good to do all of that. But the Buddha says, but that stuff is not what leads to nirvana. So this is where it's not, we shouldn't read this as the Buddha saying that you shouldn't do those things. But what we, or the way that I would read it, is what the Buddha is saying, though, is that before I was enlightened, before I was a Buddha, I taught everybody to do loving kindness meditation. I taught everybody to be virtuous. I taught everybody to do it that way. But then I was reborn as Siddhartha. I renounced as a prince, and I became a Buddha. And as a Buddha, I instituted the Eightfold Noble Path. And that leads to disenchantment, dispassion, direct knowledge, enlightenment, and nirvana. And this is a very important message of Buddhism. And what it is, if you kind of just want the really quick interpretation, excuse me, the really quick way to understand this sutra is if you go all the way back, I guess it's all the way back to the 4th section. It's where King Maghadeva first sees the gray hairs, and he says that basically for 80 many thousands of years, I've enjoyed human sensual pleasures. Now he says it's time to seek divine pleasures, and that therein lies the problem. That even though it is good to want to be reborn in the Brahma realm, it is still a desire. It is still this kind of goal. And when the Buddha talks about disenchantment and dispassion and disenchantment, What nirvana is the very ending of that craving in that way. So we need to kind of notice that there is this kind of a presentation of pre-enlightenment, pre-Buddha Dharma, which is, again, the Brahma Viharas and the 10 virtuous actions. And then there's post-enlightenment Dharma, which is the Noble Eightfold Path. So, okay, that was a long time. Questions, comments, answers, ideas, anything regarding King Maghadeva, King Nimi? So then, with our remaining time, let's talk about then the Noble Eightfold Path as a practice that is different than this old Brahma Vihara kind of loving kindness practice in that way. So, well, let's go through them kind of quickly in that way. So if you haven't heard it from me recently, everybody teaches the Eightfold Path a little differently, but I kind of like to teach the Eightfold Path. I definitely like to teach the Eightfold Path sequentially. And what I mean by that is that the first step, and it's kind of, it's kind of nice to remember that this is a path. And so we are walking the path. And so the first step on the path is samyak drishti, right? This right view, right drishti. Now, because you may not have heard this from me at all or heard it recently, the language of samya or samyak, when we hear that the Noble Eightfold Path is about right speech, right action, what does it mean, right? Well, I like to use the language or I like to interpret that as conducive to awakening. That's what right means. And what I mean by that is it's not about like right or wrong. What it is that there are, say, for example, the final step is right concentration. So, concentration, focus, right? Well, there's a lot of ways to develop concentration. You could take Adderall. Adderall gets you focused, but is that conducive to awakening? Or does that type of concentration that's dependent upon a substance, is that only good so long as there's the substance? And then as soon as you're out of Adderall, you can't focus anymore. That's not conducive to awakening. That's actually conducive to suffering. Everybody kind of see how that works? So I wouldn't say that those other ways of developing concentration, I wouldn't say that they're wrong. I would just say that they are not conducive to awakening. And so for me, that's what the language of right or samyak means. Conducive to awakening. It will lead to awakening. So the first step is about having the right view of reality. So the correct or the view of reality that's conducive to awakening. And there's a lot of aspects to this. I will just choose one among many. One aspect of having the right view, at least in early Buddhism for sure, one aspect of having the right view of reality is remembering that everything is impermanent. That's like, that's what's going on. And it's a way of understanding reality. It's a view, it's a drishti that understands everything is kind of temporary and impermanent. And the idea here is that that view is conducive to awakening. The second step of the Noble Eightfold Path is called Samyak Samkalpa. So the correct samkalpa. A samkalpa is usually translated as intention. And I often use this kind of idea of that you could have a lot of intentions in life. For example, you could have the intention to make a lot of money, to be wealthy. And you may be under the impression that wealth equals happiness and security. So what I mean is that you may have the drishti, you might have the worldview that says money equals happiness and security. If that was your view, what do you think your intention in this world would be? To make a lot of money. Yeah? Because if that's your view, then it makes total sense to make a lot of money, if that's your view. I would suggest that that view, though, that money equals happiness, is not a view that is conducive to awakening. Therefore, I would say that the intention of being like a billionaire, that is an intention that is not conducive to awakening. Whereas traditionally, the right intention is the intention to renounce the world. And the idea is that that intention is conducive to awakening. The intention to not be violent is conducive to awakening. And so what I'm getting at is that intentions in Buddhism are basically vows or precepts. That idea of like, you know what? I don't want to lie. I recognize that false speech is conducive to suffering. And I recognize that truthfulness is conducive to awakening. So my intention is to be honest, to not be violent, and all of that. So right view is the support for your intentions because your view informs your intentions. And then, as I like to say it, the intentions we have are usually what we wind up talking about. And so that's how you move from right intention to right speech or right action in that way. So the idea is that from our mind, from our intentions, that's where we talk and that's where we do. In other words, I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be a billionaire. So we are talking, if that was our view, then we would set the intention to make a lot of money, and then we would go around talking about it. Whereas if my view was that everything's impermanent, therefore I shouldn't really get attached to anything, and therefore my intention is to renounce, not gather and cling, but renounce, that's my intention. The way that I speak will be in conformity with that intention and with that view. And then what I do with my body, my actions, will, if they are in line with my view and my intentions and my speech in that way, then my actions are now conducive to awakening. And then, of course, the idea is that the way that you use your body on a repeated daily basis is your livelihood. So you have this understanding of the way the body is used, so right action. And I want you to notice how that turns right into right livelihood. Because livelihood, again, is sort of how we use our body on a daily basis to survive. And then the idea from a certain Buddhist point of view is that if you have the right view here, and from that correct view, you're making the right intentions, and therefore you're speaking in a way that is conducive to awakening, you are acting in a way that's conducive to awakening, and if on a daily basis, in terms of your livelihood, it is conducive to awakening, then all of that is the necessary basis for you to put forth the correct effort. And one of the things that I really like to point out about right effort, if you had the view that money equals happiness, and therefore you had the intention, I'm going to make a lot of money in order to be happy. And then you used your voice and you used your body and made it your livelihood to make a lot of money because that was your view that you were going to be happy because of that. If one day you'd been working 40 hours a week, week after week after week after week, and you still weren't happy, and you had a bank full of money, but you still weren't happy, wouldn't it make sense for that person to make more money? Right? Because that's their worldview, is money equals happiness. And if I'm not happy, I better make more money. And that means I got to work more. I have to work 60 hours a week, 70 hours a week in order to make the money that I think is going to make me feel happy and secure. So I want you to notice that based upon your view and your intentions and your speech and your action and your livelihood and your effort, the idea of right effort means working harder. But what if you had the view of, oh, right, I have to remember this is all impermanent. I have to remember the sutra that we read last week about how you don't take any of this with you, right? So if you had the view, oh, right, it's all impermanent. If you had the intention, oh, yeah, I shouldn't cling to this impermanent stuff. It's just going to make me suffer. My intention is to renounce it all. If you used your speech and you used your action to do all of that, and then one day you just still weren't really happy, you might go on a meditation retreat. What I mean is that your effort, it might be to stop doing things because your view understands, oh yeah, happiness is not at the end of that road. So my main point of going down this little road was to make it clear that effort does not necessarily equal energy output. It might actually mean stopping. That might actually be the right effort. And that effort would be effort that's conducive to awakening, and that effort that's based upon the way you're choosing to live your life in terms of your livelihood, which is about how you're using your action in your speech, which is about your intentions and about your view. The idea is that if you are in a position to put forth the right effort, then you can cultivate right mindfulness, right correct states of meditation that are conducive to awakening. And then finally, based upon correct mindful meditation, you can establish correct samadhi, a type of concentration that is conducive to awakening, not a type of concentration that is conducive to wanting more. In other words, there are certain kinds of meditative states that are, well, they cause desire. They cause you to want to get back there in that way. So right concentration and right mindfulness are very delicate in that sense, because there's a lot of ways to meditate, and they're not all sort of the right way in that sense. So, all right, that's my quick run through with the Eightfold Path. That's the new program, right, that the Buddha laid down, and he's saying to Ananda. And by the way, let's kind of catch all the parallels. Ananda is not the Buddha's son, but he's giving him the same talk that all the kings gave their sons, as far as the whole, like, this is the practice. Don't be the Omega man, right? Don't be the last man. So he's saying that to Ananda. And in that sense, he's saying it to all of us. Keep this Eightfold Path practice going. So, all right. Questions, comments, answers, ideas about any of that, all of that? Again, it's a subtle teaching because, like, many Buddhists, many sutras encourage doing loving kindness meditation. But I guess what I want you to know is that in many traditions, the four Brahmaviharas, they're considered like upaya. And they're considered upaya in the way that I was mentioning it earlier in response to something Noam said, and where I was saying, like, oh yeah, the Buddha often says, like, if you have too much desire, you should do metta meditation. And if you have too much anger, you should do compassion meditation. And by the way, in those sutras, the Buddha says, yeah, and if you have a lot of like anxiety or like basically an overactive mind, the prescription actually is to meditate on the 12 links of dependent origination. And you often see those as like for the three poisons. If you have delusion, meditate on the 12 links of dependent origination. You have too much anger, meditate on compassion. You have too much greed, use metta. But my point is that the Buddha uses those as like upaya. And the idea here is, if again, if you kind of want my opinion, it would seem like the Buddha is saying, like, oh, you're like way too angry. Do this meditation on compassion so that you can calm down. Then you can do the meditation that's conducive to awakening and enlightenment. But if you're suffering from these emotions, then let me give you a little trick. Let me give you a little type of meditation to counteract that. So again, it's a tricky sutra because it's not trying to say, don't do loving kindness meditation, but it is a sutra that's saying that, like, the Eightfold Path and like the new Buddha Dharma is sort of superior to those older practices of merit gathering, because that's a lot what a lot of it was like practices to gather merit for better rebirth in the Brahma world. And Buddha Dharma is about ending the rebirth cycle. We don't want to go to the Brahma world, even though it is a preferable rebirth in that way. So that's what I think the final kind of message of the sutra is seeking any form of rebirth is not the program anymore. So, yeah, Robin. Well, how do we, I don't know how to do it, Rob. Noam, can we, oh yeah, please just type it then. Let's
Okay,
see.
great, thank you.
Oh, there you are.
Could you use seeking in terms of seeking enlightenment? Or is that, it puts a bad spin on it?
It does. And, many a Dharma student wonders about seeking enlightenment and that idea of like, is that a problem? Well, here's the thing about it. It can be a problem. And what I mean by that is that if enlightenment is some sort of like goal, and in particular, if it's a goal that you think will put you above other people in some way, or even a goal that'll put you above your present situation. So any ideas of enlightenment as being like, ooh, then that's a seeking like any other seeking, and ultimately a problem like any other seeking problem. But where it's tricky though, because we need to kind of also understand like what is enlightenment? What is nirvana? Not seeking, not wanting, not craving. And so there is this sort of paradox of wanting not to want. And this comes up a lot. And I want to mention to everybody, this will only take a brief moment. There's a lovely, lovely little sutta. It's in the Samyutta Nikāya, so the connected discourses of the Buddha. So not this collection, but a different collection. It's a tiny little sutra, and it's this teaching that it's not even the Buddha who gives the teaching, it's Ananda. And Ananda gives the teaching to a Brahmin. And it would be bad form of me not to give you the reference. So let me grab the reference real quick. Let's see. The quickest way to do that would be. So it is in the Samyutta Nikāya, the connected discourses. It's the 15th section, sutta number 5, and it's the sutta to the Brahmin named Unabbaha, Unnabha. This is such an important little sutra because in it, a Brahmin, Unabbaha, he comes to Ananda and he says, "Hey, Ananda, I heard," oh, and they, by the way, they are meeting in a park. And the Brahmin says, "Hey, Ananda, I heard that your teacher teaches the ending of desire." And he says, "But isn't it a desire to want that?" And the Brahmin literally asks Ananda, "How can desire be used to end desire?" And Ananda says this very interesting thing. And he says, well, tell me, Brahmin, earlier today, when you were thinking about coming to the park to see me, did you want to come to the park to see me? Did you desire to come to the park to see me? And the Brahmin goes, yeah. And Ananda says, okay, now that you're in the park with me, do you still desire to come to the park? And the Brahmin says, well, no, because I've arrived. And Ananda says, it's exactly like that. Yeah, you need desire to get to the end of desire. But when you get to the end of desire, you don't have any more desire. Very simple. And so that little sutra, I've been using it a lot as this sort of really kind of quick way to answer that question, where it's like, no, actually, you cannot get enlightened unless you want to. So that's the kind of the answer in that way. So, yeah. All right. And that puts us right at the hour, right at 8:30. So on that note, we'll call it another Dharma Doors. That's another sutta. Yay. Excellent. Thank you, King Maghadeva, for that lovely story. And I'll be back next weekend for another sutta reading, another sutta study. So I hope you can make it.
Thank
All
you.
right, everybody. Thank you so much. My pleasure is always to be here.